Hello, my friends. We are picking up with Matthew chapter 22, and a hummingbird was right outside my window a couple minutes ago, and I'm super hoping he comes back. I don't know that he came back last time, so hopefully he comes back this time. Chapter 22. Jesus spoke to them again in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who gave a wedding feast for his son. And he sent out his slaves to call those who had been invited to the wedding feast, and they were unwilling to come. Again, he sent out other slaves, saying, 'Tell those who have been invited, behold, I have prepared my dinner. My oxen and my fattened livestock are all butchered, and everything is ready. Come to the wedding feast.' But they paid no attention and went their way, one to his own farm, another to his business. And the rest seized their slaves and mistreated them and killed them. But the king was enraged, and he sent his armies and destroyed those murderers and set their city on fire. Then he said to his slaves, 'The wedding is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy. Go therefore to the main highways, and as many as you find there, invite to the wedding feast.' Those slaves went out into the streets and gathered together all they found, both evil and good, and the wedding hall was filled with dinner guests. But when the king came in to look over the dinner guests, he saw a man there who was not dressed in wedding clothes. And he said to him, 'Friend,'" don't you think it's interesting that he's addressing him as friend here? "'Friend, how did you come in here without wedding clothes?' And the man was speechless. Very appropriate, I think, being without words at that moment. Then the king said to his servants, 'Bind him hand and foot and throw him into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth.' For many are called, but few are chosen." You know, at first glance of this story, that was told in another culture. At first glance, looking at it from my cultural perspective, I think, wait a minute, you invited them and they were in the streets. Why don't you just accept them as they are? But all those people who were collected from the streets, except one, managed to get appropriate wedding clothes. And I am speculating here, they knew they had to do that because of whose company they would be in. They were going to the king's banquet. They were invited by the king, the highest one in the land, and they knew that you do not show up to the king's banquet in regular clothes. You have to have wedding clothes on. And everybody knew that. And maybe the one who didn't knew that, and maybe he did. The story doesn't tell. And although the king was polite to him by calling him friend, he held him accountable for that which was understood, that when a guest comes, when someone invited comes to the wedding feast, he needs to be wearing the proper clothes, having the proper covering, and not his own covering, but the proper covering. Verse 15. Then the Pharisees went and plotted together how they might trap him in what he said. And they sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians, those who followed Herod, saying, Teacher, we know that you are truthful and teach the way of God in truth, and defer to no one, for you are not partial to any. Tell us then, so isn't that something? They say truth, and yet they are not even abiding by it. If they are acknowledging that Jesus was teaching the way of God in truth, wow. And then they continue to plot against him. Verse 17, tell us then, what do you think? Is it lawful to give a poll tax to Caesar or not? And background is that Caesar ruled in Rome, and they had very much occupied Israel and collected taxes. And the tax collectors, background here, the tax collectors made their living a quite nice one by charging too much taxes and living off the extra. So they're saying, and so the Israelites, of course, did not like paying a poll tax. So, is it lawful to give a poll tax to Caesar or not? But Jesus perceived their malice and said, why are you testing me, you hypocrites? Calling them hypocrites rightly, because they just said that he taught the way of God in truth. And why weren't they abiding by it? Verse 19, he says, show me the coin used for the poll tax. And they brought him a denarius. And he said to them, whose likeness and inscription is this? They said to him, Caesar's. Then he said to them, then render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And hearing this, they were amazed, and leaving him, they went away. So wonderful. The implication here, which is not stated, is that people were made in the image of God. The implication here is that people need to give to God what is God's. And if we are made in God's image, then we need to give ourselves to God, whom they just said Jesus taught the way of God in truth. Verse 23, on that day some Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to Jesus and questioned him, asking, Teacher, Moses said, if a man dies having no children, his brother as next of kin shall marry his wife and raise up children for his brother. Now there were 7 brothers with us, and the first married and died, and having no children left his wife to his brother, and also the second and the third down to the 7th. Last of all, the woman died. In the resurrection, therefore, whose wife of the 7 will she be? For they all had married her. But Jesus answered and said to them, you are mistaken, not understanding the Scriptures nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. Isn't that interesting that the Sadducees, who don't even believe in the resurrection, were trying to get Jesus in a corner by posing him a question about a supposed thing in the resurrection. But then Jesus calling them out and saying, yes, there is a resurrection, and in fact, they neither marry nor are given in marriage. Wow. Okay, but are like angels in heaven. Interesting. And also, he doesn't say that they are angels in heaven, like they turn into angels, but they are like angels. Verse 31. But regarding the resurrection of the dead, Have you not read what was spoken to you by God? I am the God of Abraham, and the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living." When the crowds heard this, they were astonished at his teaching. But when the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered themselves together. One of them, a lawyer, asked him a question, testing him. "Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law?" And he said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the great and foremost commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend the whole law and the prophets." Now, while the Pharisees were gathered together, Jesus asked them a question. "What do you think about the Christ? Whose son is he?" They said to him, "The son of David," meaning a descendant of David. He said to them, "Then how does David in the Spirit call him Lord, saying, 'The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies beneath your feet'?" This is from Psalm 110. So I'm thinking that David reigned 1,000 years before Christ came. I think. Either that or it was 500. I'm a little sketchy on my history right now. So, no, it's got to be 1,000. I could look it up right now. Maybe not. All right, that one doesn't have it. I'm not going to take the time. So, all right, so he answered them. Verse 45, "If David then calls him Lord, how is he his son?" 46, "No one was able to answer him a word, nor did anyone dare from that day on to ask him another question." All right, that's it for now. Chapter 23 is interesting in a whole new way. So I'm going to end this here. I want to include that the scripture quotations are from the NASB, the New American Standard Bible, copyright by the Lockman Foundation at www.lockman.org. All right, my friends, I love you, and may this word ruminate in your heart. What am I want to say? Marinate. I want this word to marinate in your heart. And yes, bless you. All right. I love you, friends.